Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Now we begin our week 5, 6 class and 2 sessions as usual, and we'll review the in this class the process of rule making, stages of rule making, and we will further on administrative enforcement, sanctions and techniques, which was left for our further review. And also we continue to survey the topic, the oversight of a administrative action or decision. So the kind of concept could be seen in a high combination to influence this area of discussion, and could not be separable in some aspect. And of course, the context could be made as interwoven with different concerns and points. So I hopefully make some comprehensive picture in coherence and some refinements. I have left many central issues actually unattended, and also missed the points to be important in this subject. So I begin this class to present you some picture. It is accepted from internet sources, and the first picture depicts the gathering of a small business person in South Korea, and who celebrates the end days of year, and they grin and perhaps with success of their business. Actually, the small and mid-sized businesses very significant in terms of national economy, and many measures, public measures or institution would be strengthened to support this sector of industry, with these industries. Actually, the environmental issue and the small business actually critical to think about the Korean capitalism. You consider one issue often raised in terms of a social justice, and also our public attention would be shared with this area of a concern, and that could not be denied in the context of United States. You'll see later. And for example, during the process of rule making activities, we find some special process, for example, compliance assistance for the small businesses. Would be one institution to be consulted and arrange it in terms of a executive order a statutory requirement or some a form of practices. It's kind of a pro forma in terms of a rule-making stages. Many proposed rules would involve the kind of process with the environmental protection and opinion and comment from small businesses coupled to perfect the process in terms of public participation and democratic administration. It's a kind of value to be pursued by administrators. And of course, we have other formal procedure. For example, notice and comment process. Often you will identify the kind of dealings in public website, particularly the Federalist will centralize the process. So you see many proposed rules, for example, and in the indication of its status, in effect, finalized or under review. And you'll see in the next picture about new administration. Myung-Bang Lee, perhaps 6 or 7 years ago, he won the presidential election, and now seen to be sworn in his office in the Korean public, in front of Korean public, probably the public space, perhaps in located in Korean Assembly. Let's see. So the change of administration would impact seriously on administrative practice or rules. You may learn some essence and points in comparative government course or other comparative law classes that the differences between the parliamentary and presidential system of government. You will know the support system, often attributed to the distinct aspect of a U.S. politics, and the election of new president, and perhaps switch to the administration may hand of the rules or the public policies under continuance to the new government. In that process, we could often see some hurried transfer or of undecided rules or others, and they may devise some midnight regulation. We often call in some kind of satire midnight regulations. So they would produce massive extent of new rules in favor of the constituencies or political adherence and interest groups who would well support the political compromise and other might be in some cases source of a campaign funds, and many factors involved to make it present, actually, and that could well be discernible and could not be denied over history and tradition. So the kind of practice would be in actually some political culture. We now see. So we could well be disposed not to see it any evils or wrongs in some aspect. However, that also raises our skepticism about the merits of a sports system. Often they appoint new staffs, typically heads of each bureaus or departments, from the pools of a presidential camps or the political supporters, and may, in some cases, form a relationship, which would be informal or personal in some cases. Yeah. So the political appointees often would represent the will of president, and they actually govern the process, a new policy priority or program. They key programs which could not be ruled out actually must be placed at the center of attention from the bureaus and departments. And the practice is interesting. For example, they would place regulatory policy officers, for example, in the Bush administration. And the name would differ in Clinton administration. One regulatory working group, the kind of a very influential post to many specific bureaus, units, departments, and it could be an avenue to communicate with the White House, and the conflict of policy against the White House policy could be moderated if the political appointees could act as an intermediary and the kind of a suretyship against perhaps probably a loyal or some abuse, arbitrary way from a political mainstream. And so the concept is very important when you understand the political and system of public politics and system of public administration in the United States. Of course, the context could be challenged in some cases in terms of a legal viewpoint. For example, what is the status of a regulatory policy officer implanted by new president, for example? Often new political appointees or a regulatory policy officer would be a person or public officers in a key post of a nation. So they already obtained, for example, some about a Senate approval in terms of a constitution, U.S. Constitution. So what you see, the appointment power in this context. So public offices who are responsible to make key or significant decisions are often fall under the authority of president. When and the Senate approval also shares some areas about a limited scope, and the officers would already be going in that way. However, a new post, a regulatory police office, may not be seen in other responsibilities, and the significant differences may be found between two posts. So they may, in some cases, are required of a new Senate approval. How do you consider? It is, of course, a controversial and could be contended, varying with our viewpoint in legal terms. No definite answer still not be rendered in any judicial terms, and so actually the oversight could be significantly impacted by new initiative when new administration may inaugurate. You see in the last picture the logo of a Ministry of a Government Legislature. What does the word connote? It is one of key public office who provides a secretarial assistance and also assume important roles to reduce proposed rules into any concrete language or provision. So therefore, a secretarial service and other competence also be based on the pertinent statutes and the same norm perhaps would be assumed by Secretary General in the United States context. Of course, the scope of authority could not be shared in any absolute terms, might be diffused in Korean context. For example, you will see the Bureau of Coordination in the office of Prime Minister in South Korea. So we may have several branches to be compatible with the role and responsibilities of Secretary General in the United States. And the rulemaking agencies often see it very important, and the process about this context, for example, from the ideas to concrete rules could be completed to get through this process, and the process was taken seriously, and to appeal to Congress, for example, and the supervisors or others. So many pertinent branches of the internal organs would well be shaped to respond with this problem. So often stepped with lawyers and others. So internal organ and nationwide scale service could be afforded to support the rulemaking responsibilities of agencies. Okay, we now turn to see what the stages of rulemaking through the projection. You see, for example, you'll consider first the origin of rulemaking authority, and also the bureaucracies may have a separate and individualized authority about their rulemaking process. And the context could originate from the constitutional or statutory review, and you will be founded on some basic and other principles we have already explored in cases. And the administrative agencies also could be assigned to a specific task and specific statute. And in some cases, the congressional delegation would be very particularized and focused in a narrow scope and with little discretion for the agencies. And on the other, the statute could be highly general in numerous occasions. And so actually the attribute and provisions of statute could vary. See, that requires close attention of a state administrative agencies. And the agencies now needs authorization to proceed with rulemaking. So the authorization would facilitate the whole of a rulemaking process. In the context, the available resources would come as critical factor to contemplate on. So whether to proceed with rulemaking or withdraw the options about that type of rulemaking matters. In some cases, they could see as scanty of financial resources to support others. And as I've said, a priority setting system could operate very effectively to decide whether to proceed with rulemaking or not. So often it is a central concept in the authorization process, priority setting system. So the supervisors or heads of agencies need to have that wisdom to assess its importance in terms of many factors involved, what the public needs, for example, and the cost-benefit analysis, for example. And the stages of rulemaking will advance to planning the rulemaking. This is also a very important stage, since it would direct the basic of rulemaking, actually defines the nature of rules and the process to be stepped up with, and some participation, or they may have many phases about consultation or public forum, for example, and the public participation could be mandated in forms. The statute may specify the exact details of a public forum or meetings. Absent that, then they could devise based on general formality, often practiced in bureaucracies, and supported by the requirement of a APA. And the stages could get through from developing the draft law or rule, internal review of draft rule, and we also get through external review of draft rule. So the Congress or other interest groups could be available to communicate and discuss and evaluate the programs and the position about that specific policy, and also in the process of internal review, for example, the field office would provide a good opinion or comment which is helpful. Today's newspaper said the UN would like to place a field office to monitor or surveil the human rights situation of North Korea. However, that would be rejected by the Korean government. So since we have now in very distinct position, we pursue national policy of a peaceful unification. So we need to communicate and should be constructive to accommodate, and in some cases, of course, critique the position of North Korea as anyway unfriendly place. And the concept, however, could be borrowed. For example, in terms of rule-making process, actually we can extract helpful information from the experience, or vanguard or forefront of that contention or issues. And in terms of internal review, we have one important organs to be responsible for this important process. OMB, what is that? Organization of Management of Budget, in collaboration with OIRA, what is Organization of Information and Regulatory Act. So that could be a general context of a oversight or internal review within the executive branch. So centralized to govern most of the process by providing assessment review, for example, and also in terms of financial allocations of financial resources, we'll consider and revision and publication of draft rule would be taken seriously, since many concerned people would focus on the reduced and finalized form of law. So their attention could be concentrated, and the use of language and terms of provisions and its symbiotic relationship with existing statute or others. A comport and coherence would need to be ensured to get through successfully the process. And public participation should not be merely one of a catharsis. If the public opposition could be expected as intractable and predictable, then the process could be realistically gone in the air or in satire. So they would perform as perfunctory, merely hypothesizes the process at most extent, and as an expert bureaucrat, they would share its success through the process. So that could be merely supported in supportive in mere fashion, just a formality to be processed. However, in many cases, public participation would be a useful source of ideas, and in cases, the opinions could be reflected to impact some change or modification. Or, of course, in other cases, the draft rule could enter into force without change, for example, as opposite. You may see the process would highly be burdensome, or the state agencies would experience encumbrances to comply with. However, you see in the case a due process of law or other Chevron, in cases of public law, administrative law, the important words would be useful. So, with all the possible flaws, untidiness, or a delay, we need to ensure the constitutional process in due context, and indispensable with the democratic virtue now we share as a constitutional sovereign. So what is that? So you have been introduced about the triology, public administration, law, and politics. Highly intertwined to make a combined the effect on the interest groups, Congress, and President and administrative agencies. So actually, it could be inevitable. We will soon occasion a local election in South Korea. How do you find? Do you support a major opposition party? So actually, the public opinion turned worse. Seoul city is one of a contentious electorate. You see, granite fortress under siege on behalf of a democratic opposition party. And the public administration also is made transformative with the institution of local election. In decades ago, we have no local elections. So the local administration would be shaped by a executive branch, typically under a centralized control of presidency. That would not be the case of in the initiative of a more enhanced democracy. How do you see its pros and cons? Now, some public issues had arisen, for example, about the partisan system to interact with a local election. So the candidate should be nominated by political party. How do you see its priority or any primacy can be embedded? So any shift on practical grounds and circumstances. Now the nation are situated. I have mentioned a support system and a midnight regulation. You will see one interesting story about Bush administration. Of course, the context could be continued. The president on continued basis over change of respective administration. Clinton administration also dumps the new policies or rules. So the tradition was challenged by new Obama administration, and its official policy was declared to stall the rules or not finalized, of course. In effect, could be in any effective measure to denounce or make it out of track. So the rules and policies could be made timid with all the available measures. So what is that? For example, the Congressional Review Act in 1995 may be availed of to respond with that undesired practices. Of course, that position could not be fortressed in some on some reason. For example, it may prompt litigation. So stakeholders would be enormous. You'll consider for example, Congress and many interest groups, and the radical measure to counter the extent of support system could be challenging, of course. So actually, it poses complicacies and dilemmas in some cases, and that could show the diet of a coupling, actually, between politics and public administration. Often we may have some traditional interplay among three branches. So some practices or organizations may go in some distinct way. What the idea of a check and balance could not be salient. Instead, in lieu of that attribute, the collaboration or a strategic partnership would come in any more pronounced. For example, consider the organization of USTR, and it is a distinct organ outside the normal cabinet level, one of typical organs. And the trade issue now requires a interbranch collaboration. The United States Congress, of course, take a lead to forge the interest of industries, as the Constitution says. And what is a TPA program, for example. So a presidential law also be assigned seriously to collaborate with the initiative of Congress. So, for example, the USTR now faced with a multiplicity of norms. So they are responsible to enforce a super 301 and a special 301 amendments, intellectual property, right? They need to identify the priority group of countries which practice, which maintains unfair practice against the interest of the United States trade, and it is expected to assume a strategic role to respond readily and open highly representative of a trade interest. So in review of this area of concern, you will have two eyes, how the stakeholders would collaborate, and also apply check and balance to moderate any arbitrary abusive power, public power. So the institution, USTR now maintains, for example, would be critiqued by international jurors, for example. And two perspective may be enlarged for you. What a lobbying power is highly overwhelming to support the state concept of state sovereignty in the international community, for example. And they criticized the Super 301 or Special 301 amendment is peculiar and since the public law actually functions to advocate the private interest groups. The traditional adherence between two realms in notion and statecraft could be undermined seriously with this those institutions. How do you see this argument? Could you agree? And of course, the lobbying power may, in some cases, provide an assistance, legal or professional assistance about state system and administration. And they actually write new rules in the purpose to compel a compliance with TRIPS agreement, for example. Imagine the poor African state should, not only in terms of economy, but also in state system, are also deprived, and no technical steps could be available to shape a advanced system of intellectual law. So actually TRIPS imposes a scope of duties, requirements about for example, border inspection, confiscation, in some cases bonds to post about a compulsory measure in at the international border. So, and there would also some institution which allows a favorable treatment on behalf of less developed countries, least developed countries. So the enforcement date may be deferred to allow sufficient time to respond with a national legal system. In any case, we can see some positive role to modernize the intellectual property law of African states with the aid of U.S. diplomats or lawyers. However, that could be seen otherwise when we focus on sovereign concept in the international law. So it could be an implied implied compulsion or the other point to be raised would be is tendency of wording. and it is actually compelled by Congress. And they are required as a matter of statute to produce an annual report about a list of priority groups, the list of watchful countries, for example. In one occasion, Korea also make a list to be surveyed or monitored in terms of protection of intellectual property. So the process is distinct from other areas of public administration. However, we see some distinct system which could be based on separate dealings of respective state statute. So we, as state administrative agencies or bureaucrats, need to contemplate whether we have any a general delegation or any particular statute, and also must be wise to sense the ethos of delegation, and is it mandatory as a requirement, or areas to be consulted in leniency? The process could be rigorous to respond with the statute in some cases. However, in some cases allow soft nature of delegation to make a plain, which might be agnostic in some sense, since it could be rough and undefined. However, that point would reserve the space about administrative expertise, and what Korea senior officials, therefore, would often be important, notwithstanding their expertise in law waters. So actually, the concept, therefore, could be divided into possibly the kind of three sectors: politics, law, and career bureaucrats. How to structure that interplay, of course, often could not be definite, since there would no system, written system or others. So actually, in practice, could say much. And what I like to emphasize in this class would be the change of administration, and in terms of its impact on usual administration. So often the new president, he or she appoints heads to all the agencies. These appointees must then be confirmed by the Senate. Typically, agency heads share the same political beliefs as the president, though they may lack experience in the political realm. Agency heads often begin their role with an aspiration to create change. Many also leave their positions mystified because they were unable to be as influential as they saw. What the main agency has failed to realize is the rulemaking as a process does not change. A prescribed set of stages must be followed to create rules. In this way, the power of agency is somehow limited. So you'll see the attitude in dynamism between two realms, administrative agencies, or bureaucracies, and political agents, appointees, president. Nevertheless, there are more covered ways in which agencies might influence the rulemaking process. So, seniority system and the settled form of bureaucratic practices could be a treasure, you sense, a political wind, or a swift change of government may not guarantee a continued basis of a public administration. So that could only be addressed by some undefined nature of a public administration. So take a time to consider that and you also need to consider the degree to which agency has influenced rulemaking and the degree to which they should influence rulemaking. How much do you prefer the stable administration or political will of a citizen, people? Presidential elections are choices. One candidate offers her vision of policy. Criticism comes from the opponent. Voters take sides, and one wins. In the weeks between the election results and the presidential transition, there is a push to create and execute as many new rules as possible, so that the existing administration can leave its mark on the government. So it actually is historical. You consider, for example, the context could well be diverse in the backdrop of Marbury versus Madison. So in that case, a new administration, who is Thomas Jefferson or Adams, would appoint the political groups in many important posts, and the judges of public peace. So scope of a public court justices, public peace judges were appointed, but the credential would not be delivered actually to each justice. Marbury is one person to represent the disappointed appointees, and brought that issue to the Supreme Court, presided by John Marshall. John Marshall is Secretary of State of former administration, John Adams, and he actually very shrewd person. The outcome would not typically favor his political side, Marbury, peers. However, his reasoning and court opinion has endorsed his a landmark case of a constitutional review system, a judicial review system. So in terms of what it is globally considered an original state about judicial review. Is actually so. What a due administration may make new rules and hands of the political competence to subsequent administration, and they made a midnight regulations. Similar in the first weeks of new administration, there also is a push to create and execute as many new rules as possible to signify the voters the election promises are being carried out. After an election, a new president and vice president have 7,000 positions which they must fill in cabinet and other agencies, without affecting the many more career civil service positions below that level. Along with the newly appointed people will come a mixed collection of policy ideas derived from campaign promises, news media expectations, candidate strategies for a positive change. Critics and supporters alike watch carefully for altered, newly created, and withdrawn rules during the initial phase of the new administration. The most impactful and controversial changes may appear over several months' time, sometimes as a result of the gathering of a consensus among the newly appointed officials who are responsible for creating and executing rules for the most controversial policy areas. So the machination of bureaucracies are actually makes a stark presence, you see, and could ground a stable administration on continued basis, notwithstanding the change of a transition of administrations. So the context should be investigated. How to define any appropriate extent between of division between two powers. Then to increase the national efficiency. And the twilight zone to be overlapped and influenced by politics and civil services. Okay, after a short break, we'll continue to detail some of elements, and also I like to complement with a topic concerning oversight and administrative enforcement. Thank you for your attention, and I'll come back soon.